In the land beyond the forest, Emily Gerard wrote, more decidedly evil is the Nosferatu, or vampire, in which every Romanian peasant believes as firmly as he does in heaven or hell. Welcome back to Dusty Old Movies, where as usual, the inmate is running the asylum. Because using the DVD scene selection, I am doing a scene-by-scene review of my favorite movie, the 1931 version of Dracula. Tonight, we are on Scene 9, Nosferatu. In this scene, Dracula's slave Renfield has been locked up in Dr. Seward's sanitarium, where he eats spiders and flies. Meanwhile, Dr. Seward has gone to see Professor Van Helsing about the mysterious death of Lucy Weston. Professor Van Helsing concludes that it is the work of the Nosferatu, the undead, a vampire, and he suspects Renfield. Count Dracula drinks human blood to live forever. And as a reward for being his slave, he has given Renfield a similar ability, but on a smaller scale. So he eats spiders and flies, which is one of the most bizarre and memorable aspects of the Renfield character. Oscar Wilde, who wrote the classic horror story The Picture of Dorian Gray, was a longtime acquaintance of Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, and the two went to Trinity College together. And one night, Oscar Wilde lived up to his name. He was making these loud, disturbing noises from his room, and two of his classmates rushed in, and they asked him, what on earth is the matter? And he said, there is a huge fly in my room, a great buzzing fly. And nothing they could do or say could calm him down. Wilde went wild. And even though Bram Stoker wasn't directly involved in this event, he certainly would have heard people talking about it. Also, in Bram Stoker's journal, he made notes about a little boy he knew who kept flies in a jar, and there were so many they didn't have room to die. And Dracula historian David Skal believes that these two things are where Bram Stoker got the inspiration for Renfield. Now in the movie, he just kind of grabs a spider for a quick snack. But in the book, he's more methodical, where he uses sugar to attract the flies, and he feeds the flies to the spiders, and so on. Scene 9 opens with one of Karl Freund's signature crane shots, and it feels like we are totally immersed in the strange world of Dr. Seward's sanitarium. We see different patients, the staff, we hear Renfield screaming, and even this guy thinks he's weird. Ah! Oh! He probably wants his flies again! No, I don't even know if I'd be able to find this out, but I feel like the idea of having this kind of small part but very odd and memorable character is something that the director Todd Browning would have brought to the table. He loved the unusual, and you can see it in all his movies. This actor's crazy laugh gives the sanitarium a bizarre and quirky atmosphere, and that type of laugh has become a main ingredient and how to depict a scary mental hospital. Him laughing at Renfield is funny, especially when he interrupts the guy reading. But it also makes sense. Renfield's desire to eat bugs is because of Dracula and not mental illness. So sane or insane, you can't understand him. Next, the camera goes to Renfield's room. And this is another one of my favorite parts. Now, there are some funny moments in Dracula, and this is the funniest one. It features Dwight Frye as Renfield and Charles Gerard as Martin, who's an attendant at the sanitarium. Martin, no! No, Martin, no, please, no! Don't throw my spider away, Martin! No! Ain't you ashamed, ain't you? Spiders now, is it? Flies ain't good enough for you. Flies? Flies? Poor puny things! Who wants to eat flies? You do, you loony! Not when I can get nice fat spiders! All right, have it your own way. Renfield's lines sound like they're from a really well-written episode of The Addams Family. They're so funny. I love how he's snooty about the flies. Renfield is a connoisseur of bugs. And the way he says, nice, fat, spiders. You could tell he's savoring the thought of eating one, while making it sound as disgusting as possible. And if you're shopping for Renfield merchandise, this is his most popular quote. His expressions are perfect too. It's despair. He looks like he's gonna cry when Martin throws the spider away. And he's ecstatic at the thought of eating the spider. Look at that smile. On Broadway, Dwight Fry got rave reviews for his comedy skills. So he's using tarantula-tastic comic timing. But his reactions are dramatically true for the character, because his immortality is depending on this. While Dwight Fry is giving a very layered performance, Charles Gerard as Martin is giving a very standard comedy relief performance. But his reactions are funny, because he thinks Renfield is as crazy as a bedbug. Yummy. But he kind of goes with it. He seems to genuinely like Renfield, so he humors him and treats him with kid gloves. Now, in the book, the scenes of Renfield in the sanitarium are mainly with Dr. Seward. And by switching it to Martin, it does take away from what made the Dr. Seward character interesting. And we'll get more into it as we go along, but his function becomes more or less someone to respond to what Professor Van Helsing is saying. But Charles Gerard and Dwight Fry interact so well together that for this scene at least, it doesn't bug me at all. Next, we are introduced to Count Dracula's adversary. Edward Van Sloan is Professor Van Helsing. Professor Van Helsing is a Dutch doctor with great knowledge of obscure diseases and superstitions. Now, there are different opinions on this, but Harry Ludlam believed that Van Helsing was based on Arminius van Bury, who was a professor at the University of Budapest and was a friend of Bram Stoker's. There's no mention of this in Bram Stoker's notes, but Ludlam believed that Van Bury was the one who told Bram Stoker about Vlad the Impaler. And what lends credence to this theory, in the book, Professor Van Helsing mentions Arminius van Bury 3 times and calls him his friend. As I learned from the researches of my friend Arminius at Budapest, he was in life a wonderful man, soldier, statesman, and alchemist, the latter of which was the highest development of scientific knowledge of his time. Other possibilities are Georg Andrew Hellwing, who is a Lutheran pastor who studied and wrote about vampires and werewolves. And another possibility is the German professor Max Mueller, who specialized in religion and mythology. Edward Van Sloan had played Professor Van Helsing on Broadway, and was cast early on to establish that Broadway connection. Now, I don't know if I would say that Edward Van Sloan is the definitive Van Helsing, the way that Bela Lugosi is for Dracula, and the way that Dwight Fry is for Renfield. But he was the Van Helsing that this movie needed. Before Dracula, in American films, anything relating to the supernatural always had a logical explanation at the end. The idea of real vampires in a movie was something new, and the audience could have laughed at it. But Edward Van Sloan has this air of wisdom, authority, and inner strength, where you're able to trust him. When you first meet him, he is working in his laboratory, and the camera moves back, showing us that he is surrounded by respectable and intelligent men, all hanging on every word he says. The earnestness in his voice, and the way he so vividly describes things, makes the idea of vampires sound completely believable and completely real. Read what I have marked. Gentlemen, we are dealing with the undead. Nosferatu. Yes, Nosferatu. The undead. A vampire. The vampire attacks the throat, leaves 2 little wounds, white with red centers. Dr. Seward, your patient Renfield, whose blood I just analyzed, is obsessed with the idea that he must devour living things in order to sustain his own life. But Professor Van Helsing, modern medical science doesn't admit to such a creature. The vampire is a pure myth, superstition. I may be able to bring you proof that the superstition of yesterday may become the scientific reality of today. What's so striking is how he doesn't have any fears or any doubts in his voice. He just looks at the evidence and uses science and logic and knows it's a vampire. And he already suspects Renfield. That line about scientific reality is just strong ending for the scene. It is a classic Professor Van Helsing line, because it tells you that this is a man with an open mind, with great knowledge of yesterday and today, who will be a formidable foe for Count Dracula. The exact wording isn't in the book, but it's definitely true of the character, and it's often true in science. I suppose now do you not believe in corporeal transference? No? Nor in materialization? No? Nor in astral bodies? No? Nor in the reading of thought? No? Nor in hypnotism? Tell me, for I am a student of the brain. How do you accept hypnotism and reject the reading of thought?
Since his character's introduction, Scene 9 Nosferatu is the longest we've gone without seeing Count Dracula. But so far, it's not bugging me. While Bela Lugosi is the star attraction in Dracula, Dwight Frye as Renfield, and Edward Van Sloan as Professor Van Helsing are horror icons too. And Scene 9 Nosferatu is a great scene for both of them. Renfield's room in Dr. Seward's sanitarium and Van Helsing's laboratory are just like Dracula's castle. They're extensions of the characters' personalities. The dialogue is well written, and their line delivery is unforgettable. Dwight Frye became a favorite of the director James Whale's. He was bug-tastic at mixing horror and comedy together, and that's what James Whale loved. And his portrayal of Fritz in Frankenstein and of Carl in The Bride of Frankenstein adds so much life to those movies. He was a brilliant character actor. Edward Van Sloan reprised his role of Professor Van Helsing for Dracula's daughter, but he also played similar roles, Dr. Waldman in Frankenstein and Dr. Muller in The Mummy. And just like he does in Dracula, his sincerity and authority allows the audience to suspend their disbelief, and I think he was essential in launching the horror genre in the American cinema.
So I think Scene 9 is a very wise introduction for Professor Van Helsing, and it has a rat-tastic Renfield line. So shining moments for two icons of horror. Please join me next time when they meet in Scene 10, Renfield's Warning. Until then, stay spooky, my friends.